we are. We're about to go and have an exclusive interview with Larry Merchant in Santa Monica, California. Mr. Merchant Recycles. Right, so here we are at Larry Merchant's house. This is his office. And as expected, Phantom Punch. And of course, this is not only a great photograph and a great moment in boxing history, but it's especially amazing for Mr. Merchant since he was able to be in the picture. Look around. So, everybody. Hello and welcome to another episode of Vitaly Fight Press exclusive interviews. On my right is Larry Merchant, a man who really needs no introduction in the world of boxing. Commentator, historian, analyst, columnist. As a matter of fact, Larry was considered the greatest television boxing analyst of all time by Dan Rafael.
Who's heard them all?
Who's heard them all? Who's heard them all? In 1978, Mr. Merchant joined HBO Sports as an analyst.
Okay.
Correct. And prior to that, he was a well-regarded sports columnist for the Philadelphia Daily and a general reporter for the New York Post.
I was a columnist at the New York Post and sports columnist and editor at the Philadelphia Daily News. And then I wandered, of course, into television.
Of course. As a matter of fact, in October of 2002, this man was inducted into the World Boxing Hall of Fame in Los Angeles, California. How'd that feel?
Well, it felt good. I had a lot of family and friends down. I've always been a skeptic of halls of fames and all kinds of honors, slaps on the back for people who've had too many of them. But it was a really nice feeling.
It's nice to know you're appreciated, you know, and you put in your time. So
I think so. I have a niece who just won a Pulitzer Prize, and it felt like, well, this was a prize for the whole family. So maybe people feel that way about me.
I'm sure they do. And so, Mr. Merchant, what I did was, of course, I have some questions for you, but I felt that you have a lot of fans out there, of course, and I felt that they deserve to ask you some questions as well. So what I did was I made the fact that I'm coming to visit you public. I posted in forums, websites, and I collected a number of questions from your fans out there. So
great. Let it rip. Shoot from the hip and the lip.
There we go. See, this is what Larry Merchant is known for. You know, that and his hard-hitting, blunt questions that everybody wants to hear answered. Let's see, what is the funniest thing? Oh, I forgot which fight that was, but this guy is so hot he could melt global warming. Remember you saying that?
No,
I forgot which fight.
but I usually don't remember what I said almost as soon as I've said it.
Number one. Have you ever started off by really disliking a fighter for whatever reason and then ended up liking them for something they did in or outside of the ring?
Well, there have been many fighters and athletes, because I did cover Olympics and Super Bowls and World Series and so on, who you may not particularly like personally, who may not be good with the press, now called the media, but whose exploits on the field have to be recognized, and also how their teammates feel about them, how others in their profession feel about them. So all of it comes into play, but at the end of the day, if you do have some personal feeling about a performer, sometimes you have to lean over backwards to try to be as fair as you can.
Sure. Boxing is a sport. Where is it headed? You've been following boxing for decades, and I'm sure you're the best person to ask. Looking at past, present, possibly future, where is it going?
Well, certainly the momentum has gone in the U.S. For the last decade and a half or so toward the domination by Latinos, whether they are American Latinos or fighters who come up from south of the border. And in general, it's a game like other games, basketball and hockey, for example, that have become globalized, and that there are great athletes all over the world, and heroes and stars in other countries. And now, because of communications and because the American marketplace for big fights is still a big marketplace, we get to see more non-American fighters, Manny Pacquiao being the obvious star, superstar, personality, celebrity right now.
Sure. Now, did you know that, just an offside fact, did you know that Manny Pacquiao opened a tattoo shop in West Hollywood? Have you heard about that yet?
No, I haven't. Nothing that Manny Pacquiao does outside of the ring surprises me, or inside of the ring, obviously, because he's one of those rare athletes who seems to use the distractions that come along with fame and fortune in a positive way, and who can still concentrate on the fights he has and not let those distractions get in the way.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised when when he became part of a politician. I expected his boxing to slowly but surely fade, which it never did.
Well, it still could. I mean, nowadays, a star like Manny Pacquiao could lose to someone and keep going and come back and win, and he could extend his career into the sunset, the way Bernard Hopkins has. But he may be inclined, because of his love of politics or public service, to get out before they knock him out.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Juan Manuel Marquez fighting Erik Morales next? Has Morales done enough since coming out of retirement to earn this shot?
Morales has earned this shot by being Morales.
Sure.
By being a star in boxing during a decade when the featherweights ruled the world the way heavyweights used to. And he was part of that group, along with Barrera and Hamed and a few others. Marquez actually wasn't in that group at the time.
Sure.
He didn't reach his peak until he was later in his career. So in that sense, he's earned it. Can he still fight on that level? No. But will there be a lot of interest in the fight, particularly in Mexico? Two of the best fighters since the days of Chavez? Undoubtedly. It's a chance for him to get on the big stage again and to make some money.
Do you think he's capable at this point in time of beating somebody like Marquez, who had no breaks and took every fight he was offered?
Well, we have seen elite fighters who have taken time off.
Sure.
And been able to come back.
Sure.
Sugar Ray Leonard, George Foreman, Mayweather has had very few fights over the last few years. I don't know if he's in that category. I just hope he can go out and make a good fight. And that getting there and fighting a good fight will be his victory, whether he wins or not.
So, in your opinion, what makes an exciting fight?
Something that thrills us, something that moves us, something we want to see again someday on the best fights of a particular era.
Well, the reason I ask is because we have the Manny Pacquiao's and the Floyd Mayweather's. The Pacquiao's who just go right in there and rip it, and we have Floyd Mayweather, a technical fighter who will, you know, who play.
Let me put it this way. On ESPN Classic, where they show all the fights, how often have you seen Willie Pep?
Not often enough.
Who some old-timers regard as one of the great fighters of all time. Are people interested in watching one-sided clinics? People want to see not only skill, but will, passion. A great promoter, Teddy Brenner of Madison Square Garden, once said to me, "There's no room in boxing for perfection. For the guys who are experts at, not at hitting, but at not getting hit," is what he meant. Floyd Mayweather is one of the exceptions in the sense that, like Whitaker, Willie Pep and Benny Leonard in the old days, he happened to be a pure boxer who, through one fashion or another, has been able to get recognition, primarily because he is really smart about marketing himself, turning 24/7 into his own reality show, showing up on Dancing with the Stars, etc., to reach beyond boxing. That is extremely rare. If he didn't have that sense of how to self-promote himself, he would have fought more often and perhaps would have had to fight in a different style.
Sure. You have interviewed Mayweather a lot of times, and in your own opinion, why won't Mayweather fight Pacquiao? I know this question has been chewed over and over millions of times already. Some say it's financial, some say it has to do with his uncle, and now obviously he has his own problems.
My sense of the matter with Mayweather regarding Pacquiao, it was that several things came into play. One is he had made a lot of money since the De La Hoya fight. And secondly, I don't think he was afraid of Pacquiao. I do think, however, that he sensed that for the first time he would go into a fight when he wasn't absolutely sure that he was going to win. And he has built his identity so strongly around his being unbeaten, which has never really mattered in boxing. He started to look for reasons to want to dominate the negotiation or the promotion or in some other way to distract us from the realities of, I don't have to fight now, and if I do have to fight, and I'm going to fight a guy like this, then I've got to get the best of everything to satisfy myself that it's going to be good.
Yeah. Well, definitely. What do you think? You know, Mayweather's been in the news quite a bit lately, but he made certain comments a year or 2 years back that, you know, everybody wanted the Pacquiao fight, and Floyd said in a couple of interviews that people criticize him for picking Marquez as saying Marquez was too small for Mayweather, yet Pacquiao would be fine. So, do you think there's a little bit of people taking side?
I don't think there's a double standard. I thought that when he signed to fight Marquez, it was a brilliant business move on his part, coming out of over years of inactivity and fighting a smaller, older guy who really wasn't quite on his skill level. To me, the fight was over when the contract was signed. Nevertheless, Marquez was a big name, and the question of the inactivity, etc., got people's attention. Do I think there's a double standard? No, I don't think there's a double standard. People like to watch Pacquiao fight, for one thing. He keeps fighting for another thing. He had two very close fights with Marquez in the lower weights. On the other hand, he moved up and fought guys that Mayweather refused to deal with in a serious way to negotiate fights. Cotto and Margarito. And has proven that he can fight bigger guys now. He's gradually moved up. And this sidelight, when they were both 16 years old, they both fought at 106 pounds.
Yes.
Okay? The difference being Pacquiao was a professional and Mayweather was an amateur, right?
Yes.
And gradually they grew, and Mayweather was a division ahead of him. And the reality is that Mayweather is now a full-grown welterweight, proof of which was that he deliberately didn't come in at a stipulated weight to fight Marquez at 144, 145.
Yeah.
And Pacquiao is basically a 140 pounder now. And probably if there was a huge event out there, could go lower if he had to. He's the only fighter I've heard of, as Freddie Roach has pointed out, who eats both breakfast and lunch before a weigh-in. Otherwise, he'd probably weigh 141 and 142 for all of these fights. So he is smaller than Mayweather. Maybe that gives him a pass, but he's taken on the biggest, toughest guys out there and hasn't flinched.
Speaking of that, you think Pacquiao can go up in weight, or can Sergio Martinez go down in weight? This fight has been talked about since the last Paul Williams fight. Is that something that might happen?
It's only been talked about by Martinez or his handlers for obvious reasons. You know, first of all, just as everybody used to try to get on Oscar De La Hoya's dance card, everybody wants Manny Pacquiao's dance card. This is where the money is. Boxing is a sport, but it's a business. It's quite understandable. Martinez has no quantifiable following in the U.S. And sure, he'd love to fight Pacquiao, but I don't think anybody seriously thinks that Pacquiao's going to go up to junior middleweight to fight the middleweight champion of the world. I think that's a division too far, and unless the situations were reversed and Pacquiao and Martinez was the big attraction, yeah, then Pacquiao would find a way to fight him. There's no disgrace in losing to him. But not now, no. There are guys out there that Pacquiao can fight now and into the future, as far as we can see. That will be fair matches.
Who should Pacquiao fight next? I mean, he's fighting Mosley, and
well, I think, in my judgment, he should have fought Marquez, because it would give everybody a narrative because of their first two fights. I happen to think that from what we've seen, it's not going to be size in the welterweight division that beats Pacquiao or seriously competes with him. It's going to be somebody who is skilled and quick.
A technical fighter.
Somebody who knows how to fight and is willing to fight, as Marquez proved, getting off the canvas 4 times.
Yeah.
It may be one of the 140-pounders who can give him the most trouble outside of Mayweather.
Sure.
All that said, of the several fighters who were in everybody's short list, it's conceivable that Mosley might be the most dangerous opponent.
So you're okay.
I mean, I can make all kinds of weird arguments. What would happen if Mosley fought Marquez or Castides? How good would Mosley look against a guy like Castides?
Probably real good.
Okay. So, despite his last 2 fights, the second one of which I thought he clearly won against a guy nobody can look good against. But I understand completely that people think he's over. But my thought still is that 75 or 80% of Mosley conceivably could give Pacquiao some problems.
Sure, sure. Then again, we're back to, so, one person actually asked, in boxing, we have WBO, IBF, WBC, Ring Magazine, Diamond, Pound for Pound, etc. Do you think of the belts that we have, does this in any way affect people's interest in the sport? Wouldn't, something like the World Ultimate Boxing Champion belt be the best for the sport with this?
In my heart, I believe that the profusion of titles, which has virtually eliminated the word contender from boxing.
Sure.
Everybody has got a title.
Something like that.
Or he's fighting to get a mandatory for a title. Okay? And you got 4 or 5 of these mobs that I call them, these sanctioning bodies. So that means if you're in the top 10 or 12 of a particular division, and there being multi-divisions also, then you're just a fight away from fighting for somebody's title.
Sure.
And I just think that while if you're a serious follower of boxing, you understand all of the politics, and you understand no matter how many titleists or so-called champions are out there, you decide who you want to watch.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, if there's some obscure champion in some division and you never heard of him, you don't have to follow him. We know who the real champions are. We know that Sergio Martinez is the middleweight champion of the world.
Sure.
No matter how many other guys have titles.
Right.
So, in that sense, it doesn't mean a lot. But I think to the casual fan, and the casual fan is important because he would be attracted, he or she would be attracted to knowing who the champion was. That maybe if there was a Sergio Martinez who came from Oxnard and didn't move to Oxnard via Argentina and Spain,
Sure.
and he was the recognized champion and he had been around a while, maybe they would say, hey, the champion is fighting, we ought to take a look. Okay? And they find out that he's this handsome guy and he knocks people out. And maybe in that sense, you can build interest. In the business of boxing, as it's become globalized, every promoter wants to do what promoters have done forever. I can recall going to Indiana for a Roy Jones fight, and on the undercard was the light heavyweight champion of Indiana.
Okay.
Okay? There used to be champions in every state, okay? Or even in every neighborhood. And promoters would promote the guy as the champion of the Lower East Side.
He's
or
the next best
Brooklyn.
thing, yeah.
Okay? So that's in the DNA of every promoter.
Of course.
What's difficult for guys like me is calling everybody a world champion.
Sure.
And I think that to some extent it may help various promoters in various parts of the world promote their guy as a champion. But I think in the end, it confuses people who don't follow it closely.
Sure. Okay. Amongst the upcoming young prospects, who do you think is going to rise to the occasion and possibly be the next big thing?
Well, I don't think there's any question that Canelo, the Mexican fighter, very advanced, sophisticated fighter for a 20-year-old.
Sure.
Already a star in Mexico.
Superstar in Mexico, yeah.
I believe that when he fought at the Staples Center in Los Angeles on the undercard, I believe he was the biggest attraction. The way I judge that is, I know the guys in the supermarkets and on the construction sites
Sure,
here,
who they are, yeah,
and they want to know about Canelo, okay? And I know that women want to know about Canelo because of how he looks and the fact that he has a Miss Mexico, former beauty, etc., in his entourage, and so he looks like he could explode.
Yeah,
and that he's close, and it could happen when he's young. And my experience is that fans like to discover the next big thing in sports and then hang on with them.
Sure, sure.
Okay?
Wait to see what happens.
They want to have seen somebody young and dynamic, and if he's good looking and has a great body language to him, and they want to, whether it's a tennis player or a baseball player, and they start looking in the box scores or in the results, and they want to know about them.
Yeah.
And Canelo has that. There are I'm sure others out there with some potential, maybe to be better. We don't know how high he'll go, but we know how fast he's coming.
Certainly, and you know he's jumping right in. He has his own mini promotion company in Mexico, so he's starting to maybe somehow look like a young De La Hoya. Or
well, you can't contrive that. You gotta and people take a look at him and they see, where did this come from? And he's cute, and he's redheaded, and he's freckle-faced. He could come from County Cork, but he comes from Guadalajara. And I know that he's going to be seen more and more on television, and I think that within a year and a half, if both he and Pacquiao are still standing, it would be the hugest event you could see outside of a fight with Mayweather.
Interesting. All right. What do you think? Why is HBO locking out the heavyweight division? Why don't they take the opportunity to put some promotional backing behind a guy like Vladimir Klitschko in order to jumpstart some interest? And in general, what do you think about HBO becoming a boxing promoter?
Well, to answer your second question first, HBO Boxing does what all television does for all shows. If you come to HBO or ABC, CBS, NBC, and all those other cable networks, and you want to sell them an idea for a cop show,
Sure.
okay, or a family show,
Sure.
and they would take a look at your script and they would say, well, what about this and that, and can you cast so and so and so and so? They're putting up the money.
Sure.
You know, and they wanted to make it a success.
Sure.
They wanted
to make money.
They wanted to give it its best shot.
Sure.
Okay. Well, HBO in the boxing world is entitled to do that too, because in a promoter's agenda now and always has been to get the easiest opponent for the most amount of money.
Sure.
That's what he wants to do.
Sure.
HBO, which is in the entertainment business, is looking for the best potential fights.
That, yeah.
And the promoter doesn't necessarily want to expose his fighter, who is his capital, is how he makes money, to the most danger. So you have this friction. Well, if we have to fight that guy, you got to give us more money. Well, we don't have that much money. Well, then how about if he fights this guy? He says, we don't want to put him in with that pushover.
Sure.
Now, sometimes stuff happens, and the match doesn't turn out the way you hope it would. And sometimes it turns out better than you hope it would.
Sure.
I mean, for example, Litzau and Caballero, 13-1 underdog.
Sure.
Nobody thought it would be a fight.
That was a good fight.
Okay, so there is an educated guess to all of this, and HBO is in the business of trying to get the biggest bangs for their bucks. And nowadays, to bring it back to your first question, it's harder because A, there are no American heavyweights, which always was a staple.
Sure, yeah.
That 2 or 3 times a year you could count on a big heavyweight fight. There are no ready-made stars shooting out of the Olympics where they have been shown on prime time, as Oscar De La Hoya was, as Sugar Ray Leonard was.
Sure.
So there are more international stars, but they are not as easy to sell to an American audience. So you have to pick and choose. Who, is Amir Khan going to do it where somebody else might not? Is there something about him as a performer that will attract them to any audience? All of those factors come into play. As for the Klitschko's, look, we put on many of their fights. And when they started to dominate the heavyweight scene, and using the style that has enabled them to dominate the scene, and there were so many they were put in with so many poor heavyweights, most of whom were just looking to survive.
Sure.
Okay?
I've seen that already.
And if you're just, and a professional fighter who just wants to survive, usually can't. He's smart enough to know that I'm not going to lead, I'm not going to let this other guy hit me more than once in a row, I'm going to clinch, I'm going to fall into a clinch, so they decided, and presumably the audience decided, by how many showed up, okay?
Sure.
That this is not what we want to watch. I'm sure if David Haye fights a Klitschko, HBO will be interested.
They're going to jump on it, sure.
But if a Klitschko is fighting some unknown guy from England with a 14-0 record,
yeah. When you do your interviews, do you ever ask controversial questions that you don't really want to ask, but you almost feel obligated to the fan?
I don't know exactly what my thought process is. It's basically, this is what I'm interested in. There's been a background music to this event. What narrative has developed, how the fighters have contributed to that narrative by their records, by their statements, etc. And then what happens in the fight, what my eyes see, relative to what we expected to see, relative to the standards that elite fighters have set. A restaurant critic doesn't rate a diner, if he goes to diners to check out the hamburgers and the shakes, as he would a 3 or 4 star restaurant.
Sure.
Okay? So if an elite fighter has set a very high standard and he doesn't live up to that standard, what happened? Was it the way the opponent fought him? Did he train properly? He said this. These are the prospects out there for doing that. I'm just curious. I'm like a fan, but my background is as a reporter, and I'm trying to get the story of what I just saw.
Sure, sure. Yeah, you know, and it's very interesting. You know, your example with a restaurant critic is, you know, restaurant critics have days, hours, weeks, months, however they want it long. You know, however long they want to take to write their review. You don't. You have a minute or two to come up. So how do you? I mean, I'm just wondering. I really, because I you know, I try to interview people too after the fight, and it's something I could learn. You know, what advice can you give? How can you come up with a question that A is not going to offend anybody, and B,
offending anybody. I'm not trying to offend them. They could be offended, but there is a time frame. When I was a print reporter, I could stand in the dressing room after a fight for the longest time and glean a sense of a 10-minute or 40-minute interview.
Sure.
And try to communicate that. When you're out there, you have a couple of minutes, maybe at most, and it depends on how forthcoming the fighter is. You have to take into consideration that this guy's just been out there getting hit for 10 minutes or an hour, okay? And you can't expect perfect clarity and about every punch that was thrown in the fight. You try to get a sense of the matter and hope that if the fighter is forthcoming and what he is saying is interesting, just get out of the way and let him go. But if he needs some prodding, then you have to prod him, and I have no formula except I'm trying to get the story.
Get the story. I'm getting the story for all of you right now. All right. What is your favorite fight of all time?
Well, you know, Ali Fraser one was the biggest event in my lifetime. Because Ali had been embargoed from boxing for more than 3 years, the fight had been building for most of that time. 2 fighters of the most vivid contrasts in terms of style, in and out of the ring. I loved them both. And it became an international event that you couldn't keep the lid on. It was so explosive. And with all of the expectations, which couldn't be higher, they exceeded them with the drama of the fight. There are many other fights that I have seen that have been tremendous battles, obscure events that you might not remember. I mean, the trilogy of Patterson and Johansson, I think they fought 12 rounds, 13 rounds. There was like 11 or 12 knockdowns.
Sure, yeah.
And 3 fights.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, certainly, you know, Ward Gaddy and so many other great emotional battles that you feel humbled by what these men do for themselves and to entertain us.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Max Kellerman Do you think he's ready to take the front stage? I mean, to me, it seems he's not ready quite yet. There's a couple of things that have happened, but
Look, I think Max loves boxing, and he has his own style, and he is who he is, just as I am who I am.
I mean, you've seen him, you've heard him. How's he doing? Have I mean, you've been doing this. You're the person to ask. So.
No, I think I'm the exact wrong person to ask about that. I think. Look, I think Max he's a television guy who's done very well for himself, far better than I did in my early days, and the time will come when people will make their own judgments.
Sure. How do you see the Alexander Bradley fight playing out?
My hope is that they both have absorbed into their bones and tissues how potentially big this could be for them if they really perform well. And if they go for being great, not just being good. Sure. What it can mean to their futures, and just incidentally how good it would be for boxing. They will do what's best for themselves. The reality is that both of them are more boxer than brawler, and it could be a high-level boxing contest with occasional outbursts. Maybe if one or the other takes a lead, the other will feel the necessity of abandoning any safety first
sure.
Mechanisms he has. I'm hoping that the moment is so big that they live up to it.
Sure, it's going to be a big fight. People are waiting for it. If you could make 3 fights in boxing, not counting, Pacquiao Mayweather or Hay versus the Klitschko's, what 3 fights would you like to see happen from the pool of fighters that we have nowadays?
I guess I would like to see Ward fight Butte. I think Ward is the real deal. I like him a lot.
Ward will probably be watched.
Ward is way ahead of me in that regard. I'm sure he knows that if he keeps winning, and Butte does, that eventually that could light up their skies. Another fight would be, aside from Pacquiao Mayweather, which the longer it's delayed, the less likely it is to happen, would be Pacquiao and Canelo.
Okay.
And another American fighter I'm very interested in is Tavoris Cloud, and I'd like to see him fight any of the top guys, because I think he is a crowd-pleasing fighter who could capture our attention.
Sure. Interesting. Do you have any regrets about one question you might have asked the fighter before?
No, it's in a way it's like asking a running back, do you have any regret about going left instead of right? What the moment brings is what the moment brings. If I had regrets, it's questions I didn't ask that I should have asked, rather than questions I asked. At the end of the day, I don't believe there are hard questions. If you're asking somebody who knows the answers.
Sure.
Okay?
Right.
If you have the answers, to me it's like the difference between opportunity and pressure. Pressure presents an opportunity. It's what the top guy wants. He wants the pressure of making the last shot, getting a hit with the game on the bases, having to win the last round of a fight. That's an opportunity. So for me, the big event and afterwards my being able to bring something out that enhances the event, that gives us maybe a smile in how the fighters have dealt with it, maybe some insight into who they are. That's what the game is.
Okay. What are your thoughts? I personally, I really like Nonito Donaire nowadays. In and out of the ring. His fighting style is exciting. He's professional. He's technical. He has a fight coming up with Montiel. What do you think? What are your thoughts on Donaire and where he could potentially go?
I'm not as familiar with Donaire as I am with Montiel. I like what little I've seen of him. I really don't know him. We haven't covered fighters in that weight class for a long time. I'm not covering that fight. I don't feel comfortable in giving an answer to the question.
Sure.
That's a tough question. That's the definition of a tough question, because I don't really have a good answer.
Sure, no problem, no problem. And favorite sport next to boxing?
Baseball.
Baseball.
I love baseball. Baseball is going home for me. When I'm sitting at my desk during the season, I can have a baseball game on without any sound. I love the look of the game and the ballpark and the players, and I'm interested in it, and I want to know who's going where, and baseball excites me. I was a high school football coach, and I loved football, and I went to Super Bowls and Olympics and Final Fours and all of that stuff. But as I get older, I go back in time to when boxing and baseball were the sports, and I have a deep feeling for baseball.
Baseball. How long has it been since they last won?
Well, they hadn't. The Giants hadn't won a World Series, I believe, for
a long time.
Never while they were in San Francisco, and that goes back a long way. I remember when they moved out to San Francisco, and I used to see them play when they were in New York, and when I was a baseball writer or reporter or columnist, I went to San Francisco, and I knew the players of many eras in San Francisco and elsewhere. Willie Mays and McCovey and Cepeda and so on. And
baseball. Just a few questions about who Larry Merchant is. People have been asking me, who are you? What are your hobbies? What do you do outside of your professional career?
well, I have a family. I raise a 16-year-old granddaughter.
And you have an addition to your family.
And just recently, I have another daughter who just recently had a son. I read everything I can get my hands on. I play tennis and ski still. I like to bike along the beach. On a beautiful day we have in Southern California, I would typically go out 10:30 or 11 in the morning and take a 20 or 25 mile bike ride, stop for lunch.
Sure.
Come back, and early in the morning I read the LA Times and the New York Times in print from cover to cover.
Have you ever put on a pair of boxing gloves?
I once fooled around with it a little with another writer, actually before a Roberto Duran fight at the instigation of Gil Clancy, the old fight manager and trainer and announcer. But no, I'm not a fighter. I've always been interested in the competition and the drama of fights, and that it's when two guys are in there virtually naked, they can't hide who they are, and there's a part of me who wants to know who everybody else is.
Sure, sure.
And I suppose from observing me, people will have their own ideas about who I am.
Sure. Right, everybody. Larry Merchant, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
So much for answering the questions. And next time we'll see you, it's probably going to be on our big screens.
And it wasn't a phantom punch, it was a real punch. Years later, I did a show for HBO on Great Knockouts. And,
Yeah.
And it was me and Mike Tyson. And somebody showed, we found some footage. Now I saw the punch from where the angle I happened to be sitting. You can see me there.
Yes.
And I saw there was a punch. Did I think it was a kind of punch that would knock Sonny Liston down and out? No. Because Liston had seemed immovable.
Yeah, that's the only reason that it sounds like a...
People were shocked. That was part of the deal. But I saw frame by frame at that, and it showed the punch landing right on the jaw. Neurologically, there are no nerves on the point of the chin. There are nerves back in here. But when there's a shot that a guy doesn't see coming, and he doesn't brace for it, where the knockout comes from, and you could see Liston's head go like this. The knockout comes from the medulla oblongata.
Sure, yeah.
That's where.
Yeah, it's the vibration that says, yeah.
That thing in the back, in the nerves in the back of the head, in the back of the neck, kind of.